Title: Real Zombie Events the World Tried to Hide. Help this channel grow. Like the video, leave a comment, and subscribe for more stories. This helps us a lot. Thank you. Today's story is one that shocked the world. The story begins. The Haitian case that started it all. In 1962, a man named Clairvius Narcisse was pronounced dead in a Haitian hospital. Doctors confirmed no heartbeat, no breathing, no reflexes. He was buried the next day in a simple grave near his village. 18 years later, he came back, alive. Clairvius walked into a local marketplace, approached his sister, and called her by a childhood nickname only she knew. At first, she screamed and ran. But his fingerprints, his memories, and the scar on his face all matched the man they buried almost 2 decades before. How was that possible? His case drew the attention of Harvard ethnobotanist Wade Davis, who spent years investigating Haiti's ancient practice of zombification. Davis discovered that some Bakers, practitioners of voodoo, used a powder made from pufferfish toxin known as tetrodotoxin. This chemical can paralyze the body so deeply that the victim appears dead. Their pulse slows, their breathing nearly stops, and their body becomes rigid and cold. To an untrained doctor, the person looks lifeless. Once buried, the victim would later be dug up and revived with another mixture containing datura, a hallucinogenic plant that erases short-term memory and creates a dreamlike trance. The person could walk, talk, and obey commands, but they had no sense of identity, no awareness of time, and no memory of who they were. In other words, they were alive, but empty. Davis collected samples of the powder and tested them in laboratories in the United States. He found that the ingredients were real, and the toxic combination could indeed cause a death-like paralysis followed by partial recovery. Haitian law even acknowledged zombies as a legal category of victims, defining zombification as the administration of substances that induce prolonged lethargic states. For decades, skeptics dismissed the case as superstition, but the biological mechanism was real. Clairvius Narcisse's blood samples later confirmed exposure to tetrodotoxin. His case remains the only medically verified zombie resurrection in modern history. The terrifying part isn't black magic. It's how easily the human body can be switched off and then turned back on. Clairvius lived quietly after his return. When asked about his years in captivity, he said only, "I remember working. I remember hearing others breathe, but none of us could stop." The story faded into folklore, but science had already opened a door. If chemistry could suspend the boundary between life and death once, it could happen again, anywhere, to anyone. And this was only the beginning. The modern science of the undead. Half a century later, science revealed more ways the line between life and death can blur. Some didn't come from rituals, they came from laboratories. In the early 2000s, doctors studying autoresuscitation documented people who moved, gasped, or even sat up after being declared dead. Known as the Lazarus reflex, this phenomenon occurs when electrical impulses continue firing in the brainstem after cardiac arrest. The body appears lifeless, but residual nerve activity can trigger sudden, involuntary movement minutes or hours later. It's not resurrection. It's a reminder that the brain doesn't always die when we think it does. Then came the drugs, synthetic compounds like flakka and bath salts, which flooded emergency rooms across America during the 2010s. Videos captured people attacking walls, cars, and even strangers, moving with unnatural speed and endurance. Toxicologists explain the behavior. These substances overload dopamine and adrenaline receptors, causing hallucinations, hysteria, and total loss of pain response. The result looks horrifyingly familiar: glassy eyes, slack jaw, violent convulsions, and no recognition of self or surroundings. Law enforcement called it the zombie drug crisis. In some states, entire task forces were created to contain outbreaks of users who acted non-human. What was once mythology was now visible on dashcams, news broadcasts, and social media in real time. Meanwhile, in wildlife research labs, a disease known as chronic wasting disease began spreading among deer and elk across North America. The infected animals lose coordination, drool continuously, and wander aimlessly without fear or instinct. Under the microscope, scientists found the cause: prion, twisted proteins that eat holes in brain tissue. The disease is incurable and fatal, but it can survive for years in soil and plants. Even after the host dies, the infection lives on. Prion are the closest thing biology has to an indestructible virus. They aren't alive, but they replicate endlessly. They can't be killed by heat or chemicals. Once released into the environment, they remain active indefinitely. The Centers for Disease Control quietly monitors CWD's potential to jump species. So far, it hasn't infected humans. But lab experiments show primates exposed to similar prion eventually developed symptoms. Between drug-induced psychosis, prion brain decay, and spontaneous nerve reactivation, science has proven that zombie behavior isn't just a myth, it's a pattern, a biological glitch. And glitches can spread. Each discovery brings us closer to understanding that the undead don't have to crawl out of graves. Sometimes they walk among us, still breathing. The future threat beneath the ice. In 2022, a team of French and Russian scientists revived viruses frozen for nearly 50,000 years in Siberian permafrost. The media called them zombieviruses. It wasn't an exaggeration. These organisms, sealed in ancient ice, had been dormant since before the last ice age. Yet within hours of thawing, they began replicating again, perfectly preserved, perfectly active. While they currently infect only amoebas, the experiment proved one disturbing fact: frozen pathogens can survive indefinitely and return to life when the Earth warms. As climate change accelerates and permafrost melts across the Arctic, scientists fear that long-extinct diseases could re-emerge. What if one doesn't need a host from the past, only one that's already here? Viruses evolve faster than any other form of life. In the wrong conditions, a simple mutation could turn a harmless microbe into a neurological parasite, one that targets behavior, movement, or fear. It's not a Hollywood fantasy. It's what real parasites like Toxoplasma gondii already do to animals, controlling their instincts and steering them to their predators. In 2024, a small Alaskan village reported a strange illness after a local hunter handled a diseased deer carcass. Victims described sleeplessness, tremors, and loss of emotional control. Some wandered at night in freezing temperatures, barefoot, eyes unfocused. The event was dismissed as a collective psychogenic episode. But a few researchers noted elevated levels of prion-like proteins in blood samples. The files were sealed. Meanwhile, governments quietly updated their emergency manuals. A clause added to several national protocols read, E3 containment procedures, unresponsive mass behavioral event. No further explanation was given. It's possible that humanity's oldest fear, the dead walking again, isn't superstition at all. It's evolution's shadow, waiting beneath the surface. Whether through neurotoxins, chemicals, or frozen pathogens, nature already holds the tools to erase free will and animate flesh long after the mind is gone. If the past gave us zombies born from poison, and the present shows us brains reactivated by chemistry, then the future may deliver something else entirely, a merging of science and decay. The horror is not that it might happen. It's that it already has, in fragments. And the fragments are getting closer. Because once nature learns to restart what we thought was dead, how long until it learns not to stop? The aftermath. Months after the Arctic discovery, laboratories across the world began reviewing old containment samples. Several reported unexplained changes. Cell cultures that should have remained inert suddenly showed microscopic motion. At first, it was dismissed as contamination. But pattern analysis revealed something unnerving: identical rhythmic pulses appearing in labs thousands of miles apart. The data pointed to a common source, a thawed microorganism with properties unlike anything cataloged. It didn't reproduce in the normal sense. Instead, it caused dormant cells in contact samples to reactivate, releasing faint electrical signals. Researchers called it Project Echo, named after the way the cells seemed to mimic nearby neural patterns. Governments quietly reclassified the findings under behavioral pathogen surveillance. No public statements, no warnings. But in small Arctic communities, Locals reported new symptoms: sleeplessness, vivid dreams, and the sense that someone was breathing beside them even when alone. Environmental sensors registered subtle infrasound pulses under the ice shelf, repeating every 31 seconds. The same frequency recorded in the laboratory tests. Satellite images later showed that the permafrost pit where the first samples were taken never refroze. Heat signatures continued to rise from beneath the snow. Teams sent to seal it described the air as metallic and humming. Their communications cut off 8 minutes after arrival. The footage recovered from their drone ended mid-sentence. "It's not spreading through blood, it's spreading through signal." Weeks later, emergency frequencies across northern territories experienced synchronized static bursts. Radio operators described them as breaths in the transmission. Analysis revealed each burst contained structured intervals identical to human EEG sleep patterns. Whatever was beneath the ice wasn't dead, and it wasn't alive. It was learning. Independent researchers from Oslo and Montreal tried to replicate the results using archived DNA. Their notes, later leaked online, contained a single handwritten line circled in blue ink. It adapts faster when observed. The phenomenon soon extended beyond the Arctic. Cargo ships returning from northern routes reported crew members developing echo sickness, temporary blackouts followed by minutes of repetitive motion and blank stares. Medical evaluations found no trace of infection, only elevated electromagnetic resonance in cranial scans, as if their brains were replaying someone else's pattern. To contain public fear, media outlets labeled the reports digital interference. Yet multiple networks simultaneously experienced identical audio glitches, slow exhalations interrupting live broadcasts at exactly 3:11 a.m. Universal Time Coordinated. Viewers described the sound as a collective sigh. Today, official agencies deny the existence of Project Echo. But a classified memo obtained by investigative journalists refers to a new contingency, E4 protocol, neural containment through isolation. It recommends maintaining communication silence across Arctic frequencies until ambient cognitive feedback stabilizes. No one explains what that means. Satellite images now show faint blue emissions under the same region, moving like veins beneath the ice. If the earlier chapters told us how nature could erase the boundary between life and death, this one asks a harder question. What happens when it begins to copy us? The scientists who once said resurrection was impossible now use a different word. They call it continuation. Because what lies beneath the permafrost isn't rising from the dead. It's waiting for us to listen long enough to wake it. If you thought the story ended here, wait until you hear what's starting to move beneath the ice tonight. Subscribe before it drops.